Margaret Thorne was just furniture to them, the middle-aged secretary who organized their files and refreshed their coffee. When the nuclear crisis erupted in the Pentagon Situation Room, she watched from the corner as the military's best minds failed to recognize what she saw immediately. The launch codes were wrong. And in that moment, the woman they'd dismissed for over a decade had to choose between staying silent and stopping World War III. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you appreciate stories about hidden heroes and global crises, consider subscribing for more content like this. The Pentagon, Washington, D.C., the heart of America's military might. Every day, thousands work in this massive complex, but most never see the most secure sections of the E-ring. Margaret Thorne, 52 years old, had been executive secretary to the Joint Chiefs of Staff for 12 years. Her gray hair was always pulled back in a neat bun, reading glasses perched on her nose, always the same Navy business suits. She arrived at 7:30 every morning, left at 6 every evening. "Good morning, General Morrison," Margaret said, bringing coffee to the commander's office. General Marcus Morrison barely looked up as he muttered, "Morning, Margaret. Files are on the desk." This was their daily ritual. Margaret would set down the coffee, collect the files, and exit quietly. She never asked questions, never offered opinions, never drew attention to herself. In another office, the Secretary of Defense's aide, Colonel James Wright, was on the phone. "Yes, sir. Margaret will handle it. That woman is the perfect assistant. Doesn't ask questions, just does her job." Margaret heard this conversation in the corridor. She smiled but said nothing. Not asking questions was true, but not because she wasn't curious, because she already knew the answers. In the Pentagon's deep corridors, Margaret's office sat adjacent to the Situation Room. This was where America's most critical military decisions were made, and Margaret was the point through which all documents passed. "Margaret," said Admiral Patricia Hayes, "could you compile the Russia intelligence reports? We have a briefing this afternoon." "Of course, Admiral. Including classified files?" "Yes, everything you can access with Level 5 clearance." Margaret nodded. The Admiral didn't know that Margaret had clearance far above Level 5. No one knew. While gathering documents, Margaret carefully reviewed each file. The latest intelligence reports from Russia contained strange inconsistencies. Coordinates, timing, even communication protocols, everything seemed slightly off. Are these data points accurate? She wondered, but she didn't voice it. A secretary doesn't ask such questions. That evening, Margaret sat alone in her small Georgetown apartment, the reports she'd seen during the day replayed in her mind. Years ago, under a different name, in a different life, her pattern recognition skills had been activated. She opened her computer. It appeared personal, but actually had deep access to Pentagon databases. Her fingers danced quickly across the keyboard, bypassing layers of encryption. She didn't search for Margaret Thorne. Instead, she searched for Dr. Margaret Caldwell, her old name, her CIA name. Files slowly opened. Cryptographic analysis specialist, psychological operations expert, code-breaking division, 15 years active service, then mysterious retirement. The phone rang. "Margaret, is that you?" said a familiar voice. "David?" Margaret's heart quickened. It was her former CIA handler, David Chen. "I couldn't find you for 10 years. Just learned you're working at the Pentagon. As a normal secretary." "Nothing about you is normal, Margaret. We need to meet. Tomorrow, Lincoln Memorial, noon." The line went dead. Margaret stared at the phone for a long time. Her past was returning. The next day, waiting for David Chen at the Lincoln Memorial, Margaret was nervous. The man she hadn't spoken to in 12 years now stood before her, aged but with the same sharp eyes. "Why are you hiding, Margaret?" David asked. "I'm not hiding. I'm living a normal life. You were never normal. You were one of our most brilliant cryptanalysts, a legend in psychological operations. Why are you working as a secretary?" Margaret remained silent for a long time. "Because I don't want to manipulate anyone anymore. I don't want to deceive people. I want peace. But your skills are still there. And they'll stay buried. David handed her a manila envelope. Have you seen the latest Russia reports? Yes. What does that have to do with me? Did you notice the patterns? Margaret paused. Yes, she had noticed. David, I'm not in this business anymore. But you noticed. Others didn't. Margaret, that intelligence is fake. Someone is trying to provoke us into a nuclear response. Margaret's blood ran cold. What are you saying? Tomorrow morning there will be a major alert at the Pentagon, based on false intelligence. And if someone doesn't stop it, David, I'm just a secretary. No, you're not. And deep down, you know it. The next morning at 3:47, sirens wailed. DEFCON 2. When Margaret heard the alarm at home, her heart raced. This was a real alert. She rushed to the Pentagon. The corridors were filled with chaos. Military personnel running, radios crackling, urgent voices everywhere. When she reached the Situation Room, General Morrison and other high command officers were gathered around large screens. Incoming missile threat confirmed, announced a technician. Russian ICBMs, estimated impact 18 minutes. Margaret stood in the corner with her coffee tray. No one noticed her, but she was listening to everything. Nuclear response authorized, General Morrison said. Launch sequence initiated. Margaret looked at the screens. Intelligence data flowing, coordinates flashing, launch codes preparing. And in that moment, her trained eyes immediately spotted the problem. Those coordinates, that timing, that communication signature. It was exactly the fake pattern David had mentioned. Rapid calculations began in Margaret's mind. Everything she'd learned in 12 years at the CIA came flooding back. Pattern analysis, code verification, deception detection. General, said the technical officer, launch sequence 60% complete. Margaret stood in the corner. The voice inside her was screaming, "Those codes are fake! It's a setup!" But no voice came out. A secretary wouldn't say such things. Launch sequence 75% complete. Margaret's hands began shaking. Coffee cups rattled on the tray. 85% complete. T-minus 8 minutes to launch. In that moment, Margaret made her decision. She stepped forward. "Excuse me, General Morrison." Everyone turned, surprised faces. How could a secretary interrupt at this critical moment? "Margaret, not now," Morrison said. "Sir, those launch coordinates—" "Margaret, get out!" But Margaret moved closer. She pointed to the screen. "Sir, that verification code is wrong." Silence filled the room. Everyone stared. "What did you say?" Morrison asked slowly. "The authentication sequence. It's using protocol Delta 7, but for Russian threat verification, it should be protocol Omega 9. Complete silence. How could a secretary know military protocols? "How do you know that?" Admiral Hayes demanded. Margaret took a deep breath. Her 12 years of hiding were ending. "Because I designed those protocols." The room erupted. "What? Who is she?" "Security breach." General Morrison raised his hand for silence. "Explain." "Now." Margaret straightened her posture. Suddenly, she wasn't a meek secretary anymore. Authority radiated from her voice. "Dr. Margaret Caldwell, former CIA Cryptographic Analysis Division. I designed the authentication protocols for nuclear verification systems in 2008. Jaws dropped. Admiral Hayes pulled up her tablet, rapidly searching databases. "Jesus," Hayes whispered. "Dr. Margaret Caldwell, top secret clearance, psychological operations specialist. Officially died in a car accident 12 years ago." "I didn't die," Margaret said quietly. "I retired, changed identity, became invisible." "Launch sequence 95% complete," the technician shouted. "T-minus 3 minutes." Margaret stepped to the main console. "Those coordinates are fake. Someone is trying to trick us into launching a first strike. This is psychological warfare." "How can you be sure?" Morrison asked. Margaret's fingers flew over the keyboard. Years of muscle memory activated. Multiple screens opened, code sequences analyzed, deep pattern recognition engaged. "Because," she said, pointing to the screen, "real Russian launch signatures have quantum encryption markers. These don't. This is a simulation designed to trigger our response." The room watched in stunned silence as Margaret worked. "T-minus 90 seconds! Abort launch!" Morrison commanded. "Can't, sir!" System locked in automatic sequence. Margaret pushed the technician aside. "I can override it." Her fingers moved with incredible speed. Code breaking, encryption bypassing, system infiltration. Skills she hadn't used in 12 years, perfectly preserved. T-minus 30 seconds. Almost got it. T-minus 10 seconds. Now! Margaret hit enter. Launch aborted flashed across all screens. The room erupted in cheers. Nuclear war averted. 2 hours later, Margaret sat in a classified briefing room. General Morrison, Admiral Hayes, and several intelligence officers surrounded her. "You lived among us for 12 years, Morrison said. "Why?" Margaret looked tired. "Because I was exhausted. 15 years of psychological operations, code-breaking, mind games, manipulating people, deceiving governments. I wanted peace." "So you became a secretary?" "I became invisible, normal. No one suspects a middle-aged secretary of being a former CIA operative." Admiral Hayes leaned forward. "Who orchestrated today's fake attack?" Margaret looked at the screen, showing her analysis. "Based on code signature patterns, this came from inside. Someone with access to our systems, but not complete knowledge of authentication protocols." "An inside job?" "Yes, and I think I know who." The person Margaret's analysis revealed was shocking. Assistant Secretary of Defense Richard Blackwood. "Impossible," Morrison said. "Blackwood has served for 20 years. "Exactly," Margaret replied. "Perfect cover. He had access to create fake intelligence, but not deep enough clearance to know proper authentication codes." Files opened. Financial records, communication logs, travel patterns. Margaret's trained eye spotted the inconsistencies others missed. "He's been feeding information to foreign interests for months. Today was supposed to be the big payoff, trick us into launching a first strike, blame it on system malfunction." The evidence was overwhelming. Within hours, Blackwood was arrested, crisis averted, nuclear war prevented, all because a secretary noticed wrong codes. A week later, Margaret sat in her office, but not in the corner anymore. In the Pentagon's most secure division, her own office with top clearance. General Morrison entered. "How do you feel about your new position, Dr. Caldwell?" Margaret smiled. "Special Advisor for Cryptographic Security." "I like the title. You could return to field operations. The CIA wants you back." "No," Margaret said firmly, "but I can serve from here, analyzing, protecting, preventing, without the psychological manipulation." "The coffee was good, by the way," Margaret laughed. "That part was real. I genuinely enjoyed making coffee. Simple, honest work." "Will you miss being invisible?" Margaret looked out the window at the Pentagon courtyard. "I'll miss the peace. But some things are more important than personal comfort." Months later, Margaret's new role was fully effective. Behind the scenes, she analyzed threats, verified intelligence, caught deception attempts. No one outside her unit knew who she was. One day, a young analyst asked, "Ma'am, how did you spot that fake intelligence so quickly?" Margaret thought carefully. "Because I learned to see patterns others miss, but more importantly, I learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing is silence." Silence? When you know something is wrong, staying quiet isn't peaceful. It's complicity. The analyst nodded, understanding. "The hardest choice," Margaret continued, "isn't between right and wrong. It's between comfort and responsibility." Margaret Thorne, Dr. Margaret Caldwell, continued her dual existence. To most Pentagon staff, she remained polite, efficient, unremarkable. But in classified meetings, when global security was at stake, she was the sharpest mind in the room. Sometimes the greatest heroes are hiding in plain sight, not seeking glory or recognition, but ready to step forward when humanity needs them most. Margaret learned that true peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict, it comes from preventing it. And sometimes that means the quiet secretary in the corner might be the person standing between civilization and chaos. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear business suits and serve coffee. But when the moment comes, they choose humanity over comfort. From which city in the world are you watching this video? If stories about hidden heroes inspire you, consider subscribing for more. If you think stories like this deserve to be told, don't forget to subscribe.